All right. Welcome, everyone, to Evernym's webinar on the future of digital wallets. I'm Drummond. I'm going to be your host today here. We have several very exciting panelists to join us on this topic. I want to explain that this webinar was inspired 6 weeks ago. I was asked to do a talk on digital wallets for the Arizona State University Innovate series. And I prepared a talk around that really went to the heart of some of the key questions in the future of digital wallets, and it was very well received, very exciting talk. And so we decided this is something that we should delve into more deeply with this amazing set of panelists that we have here. So I want to start out by having them introduce themselves, and we'll start with Nicky Hickman.
I'm Nicky Hickman. I'm, as you can see, a trustee at the Sovrin Foundation, and I've been working with digital identity for a number of years.
All right, and Marta, go ahead.
Hello, my name is Marta Geater-Piekarska. I'm Director of Ecosystem for Hyperledger and a member of the Board of Trustees for Sovrin as well, but primarily focusing on Hyperledger and its ecosystem.
Wonderful. And Daryl O'Donnell.
I'm Daryl O'Donnell. I'm the founder of Continuum Loop. I advise and consult with numerous companies in the self-sovereign identity space, as well as other startups. Drummond's we're going to dive into the wallet, this topic, but part of this came out of a frustration topic that Drummond and I had about two plus years ago, that the digital wallet, the wallet was going to solve all these problems, which we're going to talk a little bit about today, why, here's where we are and how hard this is.
Yeah, exactly. And there are going to be plenty of topics to talk about today, and plenty of questions to ask. So this is going to be a very interactive panel, excuse me. And so we very much encourage you to submit questions, use Zoom's Q&A facility. We will be tracking all the questions coming in. I can almost guarantee you we won't be able to answer all of them, but we'll do our best. And so please just go ahead and ask them whenever they occur to you, and we'll be stacking them up and trying to get to them throughout the webinar. And we'll try and leave plenty of time at the end to get to as many questions as we can. So just use that Q&A facility. So let's start out with a quick primer on digital wallets from Daryl, author of the State of the Digital Wallet Report. Daryl.
Yes, we just facetiously will use a term that John Jordan, who many of us know, he uses a lot of technical terms like a wallet is a thing you put stuff in. What we're trying to do with that sort of smart Alex statement is point out that it's just a container for stuff to be put in right now when we look at our physical wallet, whether it's cash, cards, photos, and stuff. And who knows what else you're putting in your wallet. Next slide, Drum. When it comes to a digital wallet, though, things are a lot less clear of what we in the deeper tech community, the business community, the overall world are thinking a wallet is a wallet app, a digital wallet. Next slide, Drum. We've come up with, and Kim Hamilton Duffy summarized this, actually, she said it was from the report that I wrote, but I don't remember using the exact term, but I love it. What a minimum viable digital wallet is, especially when we speak to the concept of self-sovereign identity, decentralized identity. The terms that there are disputes over some of these terms, but really what we're looking at is two different pieces. One is the secure storage side, which many people call a wallet, but a wallet that you can put something into, but you have no mechanism to put it in and or take it out and or act upon it is a pretty dumb thing. So there's kind of a minimum level of what we call an agency or agent is needed there to help, how do I communicate with the wallet? How do I route messages to my wallet or wallets? How do I back it up? How do I recover it? So this is kind of basic pieces that have to be there. It also, underneath it, though, really needs to be secure enough to protect all of those things that we're using, whether I'm doing my health records. One of my clients is Ledger, where we're securing credit union member accounts with with credentials that are held in a secure wallet. Evernym is the development partner behind that one. Next slide, Drum.
There we go.
Just this one kind of builds out, just I'm not going to go through all of these, but what are these things that a wallet can do? What is the industry expecting a wallet to be able to accomplish for people? And depending on what you're looking at, what kind of a wallet or wallet application or just application that sits on top of a wallet, perhaps a wallet that's in the operating system level, which we're not quite there yet, certainly on a standards basis. But there's so many different things that can happen. How do I render a driver's license so that it looks like a driver's license but isn't confusing people? How do I notify people? How do I use the secure element? All of these different things get into the wallet. This is why the wallet report ended up being so enormous. I think it was almost 90 pages, and it was no intention to ever be that big, but it really, once we started looking at it, it opened up a Pandora's box. So that gives you an idea what we can do with it. Now, Drum, next slide, please. So when we talk about agents, really there's a whole bunch of different kinds of agents. What are we doing with these things? And people think they'll have one agent to rule them all. Realistically, in time, I think we're going to end up with a large number of different agents. I'll have a different agent for my financial world, for my health world, for my family, for reputation management, for marketing. How do I interact with things? How do I buy things? So the key there, though, is that these agents need to be need to be able to securely interact with our wallets, but also, as Nicky will allude to, do things for us. There's certain things I just don't want to be bothered with. You know, don't ask me if my doctor can share an X-ray with another doctor. That's part of my normal profile. That's just part of my human life. Just let me do that. So that hopefully gives an idea, just a basic intro to what the digital wallet realm is like. And I think we've already got a few questions in that we'll get the conversation started.
Indeed. And I see. I was not clicking through your points here, Daryl.
Not a worry.
Okay. All right. So there's a quick primer on the background of the subject we're going to talk about. Now we're going to dive into each of the panelists has brought a leading question that they want to start the conversation with. And we're going to start with Nicky. And she observes much of the conversation around digital wallets has been about technology. But at the end of the day, adoption is really about the why it matters and why people need this technology. So Nicky, can you start out by giving us your thoughts on what this means for individuals?
Yeah, are you able to go through the slides?
Indeed, I'll go to your first slide here.
There we go. So yeah, I think about wallets as part of that layer that Daryl was describing with agents, and very importantly, DIDCOM, you know, the communications. And we anticipate that, you know, there are going to be maybe thousands, certainly hundreds of bits of stuff that you put in your wallet. And the function is really this kind of routing. This is a railway station in London. And I don't know how often you guys take the train, but you know, it's confusing. You've got to figure out, you've got to look at the timetables. Often you've got to wait until it kind of rotates so that you can see the destination. Then the platform might change, and then you're trying to, you know, get from what A to B, navigating lots of people, each with their own destination in mind and so forth. So I think there's complexity now in managing a digital identity. SSI and solutions like verifiable credentials can help figure that out. But I think it's going to be a very long time when these two systems will perhaps work alongside each other. And, you know, success belongs to those who drive through that complexity. If you could go to the next slide, please. And when you think about what the wallet's doing, it's doing two things. It's storing value and secret things, but it's also a way of displaying social status or your credentials in a given situation and or context. And these are just some other examples of ways in which different types of people and cultures display status and store value. So on the left-hand side, there's a gentleman from a Trobriand Islands showing a cooler necklace. I don't know if any of you watched the 2-minute video, but there's a lot in that trade, which is about exchanging specific types of jewelry in a predefined pattern that supports the social structure and the economic model in that particular culture. And then on the top right, you see a charm bracelet. Each of those charms has a history and it says something and so forth. And many cultures store value and display status using constructs that are a million miles from a wallet. So when I think about wallets, I think it's just a kind of a white, sort of middle-aged view of that, of grouping that functionality. So go to the next slide. And the really, for me, the key element is the agent, because that's the smart bit. And that's where there's lots of techniques that we already use in data management and identity management, that we can start to give the agent those qualities or that ability. I'm thinking of not just personalization and artificial intelligence and all that kind of group of technologies, but also elements of customization and curation. And here's some different types of agents. You can imagine they're all guides in different contexts. And I think, as Daryl says, we'll have different agents, but they've all got to cooperate and somehow work on your behalf to make it all seamless. That's me done.
So, Nicky, let me ask you, you mentioned DIDCOM as a key to the cooperation and communication between agents. Can you say a little bit more about the role that you think the DIDCOM protocol will play there?
Yeah, I mean, basically, I think it could negate the need for wallets and in many, many situations also negate the need for verifiable credentials, because it's those secure P2P connections, it's the communications that are the real liberator, if you think about it. And Daryl and I were actually chatting earlier today about it, because I was just testing my understanding. I didn't want to be a complete muppet on this call. And you know, if you think about large-scale IoT implementations, for example, using wallets and VCs is very heavy, and it just won't work. You know, I remember working on a project to design and develop customer IAM for a multi-channel for a mobile operator, and it was one of the first times we'd put something on a GPRS connection. In fact, many connections weren't even GPRS, they were Edge or something like that. So those kind of low bandwidth, really high scale, you know, speed is absolutely of the essence, milliseconds count. DIDCOM can enable that without, and this is, I stress I'm not a technical person, but it can enable that without the need for the heavy data flows, just by that secure communications. And we were thinking about the applications, I don't know if Vic's on the call, but for use of DIDCOM in routing voice calls as an alternative to IVRs. I mean, you know, I'm from a telecoms background, so for me, that comms layer is really the most crucial element.
And it brings up a very good point, which is we tend to think about wallets of exchange of credentials or currency or payments of some kind, because that's what we use our physical wallets for. But these digital wallets, given that they're holding the keys and the DIDs, decentralized identifiers, we're using for those relationships, they're really going much more into a communications management and control tool than just exchange of credentials or currency. And I think that's going to be a theme throughout our discussion here today. All right, let's next go to the question that Marta, you wanted to talk about a little bit. We've seen tremendous progress in the past 2 years on the technology and on governance fronts, but we still have a long ways to go before digital wallets reach, the full mainstream. Can you talk a little bit about the biggest barriers to adoption that you see and how we as an industry can overcome them?
Well, first of all, I think that it's still hard to convey to people the value of digital identity and self-sovereign identity because they think that everything that they have right now works, so why would they change? It's really hard to build something that is applicable and available to everyday user, right? We talk about agents, wallets, but these are very hard topics. We have a hard time understanding or deciding where one thing falls and where the other thing falls. We have 150-page document that Daryl was talking about. That is quite hard to bring further. And then there's obviously the regulatory part of it. How do we even tackle the digital identity? Where do the responsibility lie when it comes to managing situations where things go wrong? We here on this call, between the four of us, probably wouldn't be very comfortable knowing that all of our secrets are managed by ourselves, right? I mean, we are everybody's very kind of random and have loads of things to do. So something that we managed to, or we were discussing last week, was backups, where it was key revocation, key restoration, right? How do we make this user proof, not because users are dumb, but just the technology is too complicated?
No question about that. So if I was to ask you, for say 1 or 2 specific suggestions for how you think we start to overcome the adoption barrier, what would be, for instance, your number 1, number 2 thing that would come to mind, your recommendations?
I think number 1 is creating a very simple and very hidden usage of wallet, right? So an app of sorts that allows everybody to use a wallet, but they have no idea that it's happening. That will, once we stop talking about it, once people stop hearing the word wallet or hearing the word agent and just acting as normal, that's where we can start embedding those concepts in their kind of everyday life. And then I think the second thing to work on is build a kind of collaboration with the government and finding a single government that would kind of go forward with using SSI and building nationwide wallet, because that always helps with adoption.
So if you had to venture a guess which government might go first, do you have one?
I wouldn't be surprised if it was Bermuda or Bahama. These are exploring those concepts very closely. I wish I could say it was the UK, but definitely not anytime soon. I think Germany is also quite convincible there. That would be, unfortunately, not Dubai. We work very closely in Hyperledger with Smart Dubai, and while they are using DLTs for a lot of their use cases. And they had a mandate that by 2020, the whole Emirate of Dubai was supposed to be fully digital and all kind of blockchain. This didn't happen, and they made a very conscious decision to build digital identity system not using distributed ledgers and not a self-sovereign identity system.
That's
well, it was, it was
yeah.
a choice because of their concern of how young the technology is and if it can be trusted or not, and they don't want to be, the test animals.
There you go. It comes down to that very key question when we're talking about digital wallets. If it's not trusted, everything else, nothing else can be built on top of that, which leads us right into Darrell's leading question. So if trust is a key component for adoption, Daryl, how do we build trust in the system and help individuals understand what digital wallets are safe to use?
Yeah, so this is a question I dealt with in the report, and I've been doing this in various different talks. If I'm wanting to manage, say, a digital version of my passport, the driver's license, health records, finance records in some kind of a really cool digital wallet app, and I find Bubba's wallet on the App Store has 5 stars, 1,100 reviews, can I trust it? How do I know that it's going to do what it says it does? How do I know if we talk about the deep tech, we know how the crypto works and that's great and stuff like that. But what if Bubba's wallet was written by North Korea and everything I do, it's packaged up a little payload that at some point in time, it will fire off and send home to North Korea or some other nation state or other nefarious actors. And even those who think they're doing the right thing. We're going to need to have some kind of certification and accreditation regime, meaning if you want to use a digital passport or digitize certain things, whether that be a health record, identification documents, you may find, I think we're going to find that certain agencies are going to say, here's the criteria, here's the groups that can come in and audit, and yes, Bubba's going to have to go get and pay for. This is the hard part that we don't like to hear in the open source community too much, but we have to pay for a certification and accreditation. Not wildly different than we see in the FIDO Alliance, where we do see open source versions that are out there, but someone has gone and funded that certification accreditation to make sure that the bare minimums are there so that regulators, governments, key partners of ours, whether they be banks, credit unions, health agencies, can tell us at least if you have reached this bar, we can use Bubba's app, Bubba's wallet. If they haven't hit that bar, maybe we should be a little bit nervous. And so my guess is that's going to reduce the number of massive wallets out there, but it's not going to kill it, because if it's 4,000 or 5,000, 10,000, that'll stop the bunch of the open source ones. But you get enough people, they'll get those things certified.
So let me ask sort of the downside of that question. Is that going to tilt the playing field in favor of the very large tech companies that can easily afford those resources?
I think it certainly could, but there are other approaches where you can have trusted libraries that you can go and build on top of. But yeah, it definitely will be that you won't have people in the basement doing health records and digital passports and just anybody put those kind of more higher assurance credentials on top of. I think you're going to find that there's going to be, we've talked with some leaders in, I'm up in Canada, maybe it'll be 4 or 5 discrete wallet vendors in the ecosystem in Canada in the next few years. And maybe it's a dozen later, but it won't be thousands.
And another question. So you're talking about certification. Who do you think will, are there natural candidates for where those certification requirements will come from? How do you expect that process is going to work, especially if we're talking, on a global basis? Or do you think all the certifications will be regional or governmental?
I don't know that many governments have the appetite to create a brand new standard of their own. Certainly, I know groups are watching some of the efforts that we're involved with, Drum, you and I, at the Trust Over IP Foundation. It's a logical place to start that. to start the thinking, because enough players and this diversity. But in the end, it'll likely end up being formal standards, and we'll have audit bodies, so you can get a formal auditor to come in.
Yeah, and I don't think that it will be on the government level, because if we want to build something that is truly kind of pan-national, any government standardizing it will basically prevent that pan-national or multinational stakeholders, right? It will have to be something like ISO or whatever, IEEE, your choice.
Yeah, and the governments can point at it and say, if you meet this, go meet these 5 things, we're good to go.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, if we look at I keynoted Trustee, which is a big identity and card. It used to be called Cards, a big kind of chip conference happening in Cannes every year. And 2 years ago, I went around. It's a massive fair. And I went around almost every single identity provider or identity vendor. And I said, well, what do you think about SSI? What do you think about the distributed ledgers? And they were like, distributed what? Like literally, and they were not joking. They didn't really, like, other than, all right, we know Bitcoin, nobody really knew what self-sovereign identity even means. So here we are, you know, our techies that really want to deliver this thing, but the people that are sitting deep into the technology, that are actually, you know, building our passports and building our national IDs, they don't care. And it's a slow industry.
Yeah, no. It's a very real question. All right. Speaking of questions, we're at our halfway point, and we have a bunch of them piling up. So we will go very interactive here. The first one I'm going to pull out actually goes to this the question around standardization and interoperability that we've been talking about. And the question is, can you talk about the creation of standards that will work across all SSI and DID initiatives? I'm going to, Darrell's already mentioned the Trust over IP Foundation, Trust over IP stack. I'm going to take a second to, I keep this in the background because I use it at least once a day everywhere, to share a picture of the Trust over IP stack so we can at least, I don't, do any of you want to talk to this, or do you want me to?
Go for it, Drum.
Okay. So this is a picture of, many of you on the webinar have probably seen this before, but this is what's referred to as Trust over IP stack. It is the reason for being of the Trust over IP Foundation, which was launched at, hosted by the Linux Foundation in May, and it's now over 125 member companies there. And it's a 4-layer stack that's based on the whole premise that with decentralized identity technology and verifiable credentials, we can build interoperable digital trust ecosystems. And the layers correspond to what we have discovered is necessary to have this infrastructure operate on a scalable basis. At layer 1, we have public utilities, whether it be blockchains, distributed ledgers of any kind, distributed file systems, whatever is necessary to support a decentralized identifier, DID method, for routing the cryptographic material necessary for supporting the operations at the higher layers. And again, that can be any verifiable data registry of any kind, and so certainly blockchains dedicated for SSI like Hyperledger Indy from the Hyperledger project, and implementations like the Sovrin Foundation's Sovrin Ledger, or there's a number of other Bedrock and ID Union in the EU. All of those are examples of DID methods, of course. DID methods can work with permissionless blockchains like Ethereum and Bitcoin and many of the other ledgers out there, but they can also work against other systems that are not explicitly blockchains, whatever is trusted by the higher layers. Layer 2 is the heart of what we're talking about today. That is the interoperable agents and wallets, and the DIDCOM protocol that allows them to communicate with each other, whether they are, as we indicate here, with a mobile phone at the edge, or whether those agents are in the cloud. And the DIDCOM protocol work at the Decentralized Identity Foundation is deep into that. DIDCOM 2.0 is headed down the chute. I think it should be ready in Q1 of next year. And that's what Nicky was talking about earlier. The DIDCOM is the essential connection piece between the agents working with these wallets. Layer 2 then supports, of course, the exchange of verifiable credentials, and Layer 3 and the trust triangle issuer holder verifier. And it is those families of credentials and issuers of those credentials that then can support entire digital trust ecosystems at Layer 4. And so notice that that's all the technical stack. The reason for the governance stack is that governance that's needed for each of these, at each of these layers is different. There's some commonalities, and it is those commonalities we're driving out in the governance stack working group at the Trust RFP Foundation. But what you need to govern at Layer 1, if it's, for instance, a public permission blockchain or a permissionless blockchain or a decentralized file system, is very different than the kinds of standards we talked about. These would be the wallet certification standards at Layer 2. And again, a governance authority could of course be a government, could be a consortia of any kind, could be a company or a university or a city, whoever wants to create those. At Layer 2, I think they're going to be quite broad. This is where I have the most questions. Who will be the natural governance authorities there? Layer 3, we're talking about governance of credentials, and that starts to be very concrete. Who are going to be the issuers of credentials in a particular ecosystem? You have very natural, centers of gravity for credentials in healthcare or finance or travel or government credentials. And those then, of course, aggregate into ecosystems where I think we'll have the broadest governance frameworks and governance authorities and trust marks that are used across those ecosystems. So overall, I'm going to answer the question of how can we get standards that work across different SSI and DID implementations. The Trust RIP stack is an answer to that. It's not necessarily the only answer, but that's one that we're driving towards. Now, I know all of our panelists have some involvement with Trust over IP and other options. Who wants to add to what I was just talking about there in terms of this question of interoperability?
Maybe, Drum, I can give a quick example about where a couple of those layers play. One client I work with closely is CU Ledger, whose mission really is to help credit unions globally. Right now it's focused on the US. There are really two different layers we play at. One is at the DIDCOM layer, where we connect with members and have a private connection between the member and the credit union. No one else is in between. It's just the member, just the credit union. And we use DIDCOM for a couple of things, one of which is actually going and using that digital wallet over DIDCOM to sign requests. For example, Drummond, are you wiring $50,000 to Daryl? Yes or no? We would then cryptographically sign using the DIDs. We'd send that over DIDCOM and we'd store that somewhere in the compliance system. And I'm sure Drummond wouldn't send the money to me. The other layer we're working at really comes down to credentials, and these start to play into the relationship of being more portable. So how do I, as a member, say, of Unified Financial Credit Union in California, walk into a credit union in like Desert Financial in Arizona? How do I identify myself? Well, we have a governance framework at the very top, and we're sharing a credential. And then underneath that, there is some communication through DIDCOM, but really the magic there is that governance of, if you have a member pass credential, you can identify yourself using it at a different credit union who's a member of the member pass network, and that's at the governance side. Hopefully that gives you a good example, Ron.
Yeah, no, it's good. And actually I'll map that. And we have several questions that are relevant, so I'll keep this up for a minute. So when Daryl's talking about member pass is a perfect example of a digital trust ecosystem that's focused initially on the credit union industry, but more broadly on finance in general, to be your sort of a solution for member identification and KYC at financial institutions broadly. So that's a digital trust ecosystem that defines, in its case, one specific verifiable credential, and will be already has a member directory of issuers of that credential. Daryl, you help build that system. And to holders that again must be qualified. The KYC is actually performed by the financial institution. So now you have a verifiable credential in the hands of a holder, where verifiers anywhere, according to the open standards, can now ask for proof of a KYC vetted identity credential. That's a pretty powerful capability. And again, then I want to reinforce what Daryl pointed out. So the ability to issue and then exchange that credential at layer 3 is quite powerful. But if DIDCOM's been used to actually set up a connection with the credit union and then with the verifier, those secure private peer DID channels can then be used for any further communications, such as Daryl said, a signed message authorizing a transaction. That's where the power of digital wallets and agents goes beyond just the exchange of credentials to establish trust. It's an ongoing trusted communications, and the ability to track those, to initiate those, to intelligently notify those is where we get we get beyond the wallet, if you want to put it that way. So I've got a couple more questions relevant to this, but I'll stop and say, Nicky or Marta, anything else you want to say about this scenario we've just been talking about? All right, I'm going to grab, go ahead. Were you going to say something?
No, I wanted to say that you are obviously the specialist when it comes to trust over IP stack, and how this kind of comes out of efforts that were happening, within the Aries and then Sovrin, and this was kind of a natural next step to build trust over IP as a separate body.
Yes, and I'm glad you mentioned that, Marta, because we often get questions. Well, is this just an extension of Hyperledger and Sovrin and one branch of the technologies used to build SSI and DIDs and verifiable credentials? And I want to stress for everyone on this webinar, even though there are roots there are roots also in non-Hyperledger technologies, right? In Ethereum and Varus One and the W3C credentials community group. In other words, and of course, the Decentralized Identity Foundation, that's where DIF, for example, is being standardized. So the goal of the Trust over IP stack is really to be inclusive of any technology that allows interoperability across these layers, and to bring them together so that we can have, again, I think the number one test for interoperability in my mind is, can I get a digital wallet that can accept any credential from any issuer, that can speak to any public utility that is being used by the issuers and verifiers, that's trusted by them? And can I use it, in a self-sovereign way under my own control, just like my physical wallet, without being beholden to a third-party service provider or being locked within a walled garden of some kind? So that's a good example of how we're trying to build interoperability under the stack. Now, there are two questions that have come up about specific examples of credentials that I think we could tackle here. The first one is Jacques writes, he's saying his home state, Florida, will be issuing a mobile driver's license, an MDL, next year. Could an MDL be considered or converted to a digital wallet? Who wants to take that one?
I started to answer that in the text, Drum. If you take a pure ISO MDL, the data there could be converted into a credential, but the MDL spec itself is what I would call a digitized approach. This is, when I say digitized, imagine scanning a paper form that you filled out so that you can store it digitally, but you've got the whole form. Next time I look at it, it's the whole form. Versus a digital experience would be, I have typed in the information and or it's stored as discrete fields and I can do things to it without having to understand how it was digitized. I think they're going to go to the next step at some point in time, that MDL is kind of an incremental step. That's just my view, is it is a digital wallet. It's a very, very limited and somewhat of a walled garden wallet.
So you're saying that the credential itself has limitations in terms of where it can be used. But let me ask this question, because it comes up a lot. Will certain credentials try and restrict the wallets they can be used in? In other words, might Florida say, hey, you can only use a wallet that the state of Florida has produced or certified?
I don't want to dominate the call, but if you don't get certification accreditation, yeah, that will happen. And the story is likely to make sure they're protecting their own citizens. Otherwise, Bubba's wallet could be sending all my driver's license information, all my passport, health records to North Korea.
Right. So that's your point about the kind of certification needed at layer 2 here, to ensure that issuers are going to be comfortable issuing and holders are going to be comfortable using and verifiers accepting credentials from those wallets.
I think it might
go ahead, Nikki.
Sorry, I was just going to say, it might also be just made to be, from a commercial point of view, it's the perfect way to tie people into your ecosystem and your services, by not necessarily make it impossible, but making it very difficult to use other wallets or use other people's other credentials in your wallet. Something that Daryl said earlier, which I think is really useful to touch on, is he talks about digitization of a driving license versus a digital driving license. And it does remind me of digital transformation in its first phase is just, let's make it digital, what we do already. We've got business processes and paperwork, we'll just make it digital. And then there's a next step on from that, which is digital business. And that's where the whole business is transformed in the way you structure your business, the business model you use, new processes are developed. And so I think there is this transition period, just as we've gone through that with cloud computing and digital transformation. So that will also happen with this. We're using existing kind of models, not just for mental models around a wallet and an agent, but also around the basic flows and structures and how we use the technology. And that will change, I think, over time.
I think that's an extremely good point. We're certainly seeing that. I know Evernym is seeing that in terms of the customers we're working with. Some of them are very focused on how do I take existing credentials, and the business processes and everything around them, and simply move them into a digital format to remove friction, make it easier to issue or revoke, and all the benefits there, which are considerable. But then we're also seeing customers that are saying, wait a minute, there's an entirely new digital process we can enable, and they're working from, here's the process, whatever it is, the business process that we want to design, working backwards to what are the credentials necessary to support that. And those sometimes have no direct correlation to the credentials we put in our wallet today.
It's a very different approach, and it's essential. Otherwise, we miss the whole point of SSI, which is these P2P connections. We just risk overlaying what we've got already in terms of centralized and federated identity models. So I think it's really pertinent to SSI.
I strongly agree. I often, when I am talking to this diagram, and to the stack, folks immediately go to the trust triangle layer 3 and say, yep, that's the heart of it, enabling verifiable credential exchange and therefore all the digital trust ecosystems. And then they eventually go down, oh yeah, and this is the key layer 1 to making everything, cryptographically verifiable on a decentralized basis. And I go, yes, but layer 2. And it's not just because of the agents of wallets, it's because of the value of these connections. We've never had anything that is that strong, that powerful, that persistent, and that private before. And they're going to be, as I think Marta was saying earlier on, it's going to just appear like magic, right? As you in your process of using a digital wallet, you're going to be forming these connections, and it's all. So I like to point out, it's not just the keys you're controlling in the wallet, it's the DIDs that goes with those keys that allow you to maintain those persistent private connections. That's where I literally have a slide that has a set of gold bars right here to get that across. Okay, let's keep going. As I said, the questions are stacking up. We knew we wouldn't have enough time, but we're going to keep going through them. There's several questions about the role of government. There are two of them. There's what role can government play in these early days to help promote the use and adoption of digital wallets and VC approaches? And then a more specific question of how would a passport be linked to a digital wallet or a DID? Who wants to tackle those? Marta,
well,
you want to try that?
I wanted to talk about what role can government play in developing. I think that a lot of challenges that we have with DIDs and with SSI is around governance and understanding kind of dispute resolution of sorts. And I think governments here are crucial to provide guidance on how this dispute resolution should happen. Today, if there is a challenge, challenge on identity or challenge on someone challenges information that I provide in my passport, we have courts resolve those issues, we have police and so on. This does not exist when it comes to something that is that doesn't belong to the government, right? The government doesn't need to resolve an issue with my loyalty card in the cinema because they don't care about that. So it would be a very easy thing for the governments to say, well, since this is now kind of independent of us, we don't need to participate and we don't need to help. And that's not necessarily what we want. So I think this is a major opportunity for the governments to help us and to be supportive. I think that a lot of good is happening, especially here in Europe. EPSI, the European Blockchain Association, is looking at EID, which would be a standard around digital identity. Slowly we are seeing some adoption. Now, Drummond, I would probably refer to you when it comes to the question about how a passport would be linked to a digital wallet or a DID.
Yeah, and I think I'm going to very quickly say that the two states we talked about are precisely what's happening. There are services today, the whole companies like Onfido, IDPal, that will actually convert a physical passport. They'll do the checks both against the back-end system. They'll do optical character recognition, and then they will turn around and verify it and do a liveness check to basically bind it to you. And that they're now, Evernym's already done a pilot with Onfido showing how that can now become a digital credential, in your wallet. But now we need to look at true digital passports, right? Where they're issued natively that way and anticipating that it will be used around the world and will be integrated into the travel system and airports. And of course, that takes us over to, well, what else do you need? Do you need the yellow card of your vaccinations? Are we going to need that for COVID vaccinations and, getting the friction back down in travel? I think the answer is definitely yes. All right, go ahead.
I wanted to, well, two things. One thing was when we talked about adoption, one of the other things that I forgot to mention is obviously security and making people comfortable with the fact that so many things are linked together. We've been told for many years not to link our accounts and not to use the same login for various accounts. And all of a sudden now everything's linked together. So why should I trust it? There has been a question that I know that we want to tackle, which is where is the line between agent and a wallet? So if I spotted the question, now you can answer.
Well, that was Nicky's original question. So I'm going to ask Nicky, can you define the line between the agent and wallet?
That's so mean. Daryl can answer that. He's the expert.
You go ahead, Nicky.
Can you put up Darrell's slide with the logical model?
Well, I'll go right back to it.
I understand it from a very human muggle perspective. The wallet contains the secret source, the keys, the credentials, the secrets, the documents, and the agent figures out how to exchange them, with whom, in what context, and the mechanism they use for doing that exchange is DIDCOM. So an agent may be more or less intelligent, and it may be more or less a learning machine, and it may be prescribed in terms of how it acts by a third party.
It's all wonderful. Nick and I have had separate conversations. I'm a huge fan. I do like this diagram in terms of identifying the wallet as storage, protected storage, very, very importantly, protected storage. But the agent is what acts on that wallet. In the digital wallet chapter,
I'm going to push back, Drum.
Oh, go ahead.
The term there is actually wallet storage. If I can only hold things in here and can't put them in, can't take them out, can't show them to you, this is utterly useless to me. That box is a black box that is dead. There is an interaction we have, there's a ritual we have when I say, yeah, here's my card, here's my credit union card, here's my driver's license. There's an interaction that is a combination of these digital conversations that say, oh, I want to put this in your wallet. Great, cool. I'm going to sign it and take it and put it in and do my stuff. Without that, this becomes a database you cannot access. That's why this whole discussion 2 years ago, and one of the sponsors of the project is actually on the call, we were frustrated that this wallet thing, if we don't describe the rituals and the discussions and how we're sharing information with our wallet, from our wallet, putting things in our wallet, we end up coming up with a data model that you cannot interact with in a repeatable manner. Everybody will interact with it totally differently. Right. This part Nicky and I have discussed is that agent is going to work for me or might work for us.
Right, especially if the wallets are not for individuals, because certainly organizations have wallets, digitally connected things will have wallets, some of them, or they'll have agents that have wallets.
Yep.
So yeah, it's critical. What I like about the diagram, and Darrell's very careful choice of term digital wallet, he wraps around the whole thing to differentiate from wallet storage and the actions of the agent. If you think about a physical wallet, it doesn't do anything by itself, right? It's just it's a container. It's like this piece. The agent is us, the individual. And what we're doing with digital wallets is we're turning that agent into a piece of software into which I think we can build all the intelligence or even more intelligence that we're able to have individually. And this, of course, gets into the whole subject of AI, which we're going to run out of time for. In fact, speaking of running out of time, we are nearly out of time here. And we didn't even reach my question to bring to the panel. However, I love the fact that it's actually been several of our questions have essentially asked this question Phil Graham from NHS is, what is being done to make sure that the user is placed at the heart of the work and that wallets interoperate so relying parties don't have issues with creating passports that don't actually work across digital wallets and systems. In other words, they won't really be passports if they're not as universal as our physical passports. And the other question was, why are we not talking about the elephant in the wallet? I love that term. Apple's and Google's already existing wallet apps shipping with their smartphones. Where are they in the conversation about SSI wallets? Well, I know we're running out of time here, but I'm gonna quickly tee up that question. I want to share just a handful before we close of slides from my ASU presentation that frame this question, and we won't be able fully to answer it. And I've just found out we can extend for another 15 minutes to answer additional questions. But for folks who have to leave on the hour, I want to leave you with this quick understanding of the wallet wars. We all know what the browser wars, or all of us that have lived through it have enough gray hair for it, and they in fact are still going on. This slide that captured them still had IE in the first position, whereas this one suggests in the size of those icons where we've actually ended up with one very dominant browser vendor and the resulting angst on the internet on the privacy and the anti-competition issues. So I love this quote from Darrell's State of the Wallet report. The wallet wars will make the browser wars look like child play. And that's what we're headed into. I'm going to give you 3 questions to really make you think hard about this, the ones I shared with the SU audience. Would you ever buy a physical wallet that restricted what cards you could put in it? Would you ever choose a bank that would not let you move to another bank? Would you ever choose a phone that would lock you in, after everything you've just heard in the last hour, into a digital wallet? This is why it's so important. What we're talking about is the future of the internet. As I've already said, the browser, as important as it is today, is not the key to your control of the internet in the future. It is going to be the digital wallet. And the question, just beautifully put by one of our attendees today, who's going to be in charge of that wallet? Is it going to be you as the individual, or is it going to be big tech thumbing a ride on your wallet everywhere you go on the internet? That is the question at the heart of the wallet wars. And since we are out of time here for folks that do have to leave at the hour, we're just going to have to tackle that in another webinar. But I'll stop here and just say, if you do need to leave us on the hour, thank you for coming. But we will extend another 15 minutes here to answer other questions. I'll stop sharing here and we'll go back to our question list and see what the next one. And they're still streaming in just as fast as we can get to them. There's a great question about zero knowledge proofs and the role that they're going to play. The question is, with a zero knowledge proof, can we assume it will be harder for anyone other than the wallet to obtain credentials' actual value? Meaning, with zero knowledge proofs, are wallets actually going to be able to give the identity holder control over what they release to a verifier? Who wants to take that one? Me? Or are you pointing at Marta?
You.
Okay. So my answer is yes, definitely. I am a very big proponent of zero knowledge proof technology. I like to point out that back when I was the executive director of the Open Identity Exchange, when it first started up, I think we're talking 2009 or 10, back in there, at least a decade ago. And we were first bringing the concept of trust frameworks really out to, into the open. And one of the technologies driving that was information cards, which are the, I'd say both a logical and spiritual predecessor or ancestor to verifiable credentials. Very, very close in many aspects of the design, including the use of crypto. Kim Cameron, the then now retired chief identity architect at Microsoft, was a huge proponent of the use of anonymous credentials and zero knowledge proofs, even though the technology was very young at that time. And he actually bought a company, Credentica. Microsoft acquired them in order to make sure that they would have access to that technology. Governments were in favor of it. It looked like a fantastic thing, and it went nowhere. And IBM was also pushing it. They were a major. My takeaway was, wow, this is really powerful technology, but it's such advanced crypto that it's beyond the capabilities of the market. So when SSI came along and blockchain came along, and then at that time it was Evernym's chief co-founder and chief technology officer, Jason Law, said, we have to build in zero knowledge crypto. It's the only way we're going to get selective disclosure the way it should work on this infrastructure. I was extremely skeptical. And yet within months, he had worked with others to put together a design. We started proving it out, and we said, this is the only way we're going to adequately protect privacy when you remove a lot of the friction that is in the system today for physical credentials. There are folks at last week's Internet Identity Workshop, there were sessions called just to talk about the dangers of removing that friction. Give everyone digital credentials, and now every verifier can say, show me the, not show me the money, show me the data, show me the data, show me the data. How do we protect against, that kind of coercion? So anyway, that's my answer. It's a long one, but I do think it's going to be critical, not only as a technology, but then to standardize so it's broadly useful. Any other perspectives on that from the rest of the panel? Okay. All right. Go ahead.
Sorry, I would just add that my understanding of zero knowledge proofs and the selective disclosure that you're referring to, we won't always want to be in control of it because we don't really understand it in a lot of cases. And that's where the agent would play a role in terms of being able to selectively atomize the credentials into claims or make sure that you weren't disclosing, because it's too easy to fish otherwise, I would say.
Yeah, there's a good analogy. The community tends to use the "Are you old enough to drink?" as a zero knowledge proof use case. If you take the business case behind it, you can imagine walking into a bar and being asked, "Are you old enough to drink?" And your wallet that they understand can talk to says, "Yep, we're done." But similarly, I could be driving down the highway and be pulled over by a police officer. My wallet could query to say, "Is that a bona fide police officer?" Lately in Canada, we've had artificial, like fake police officers arrested. I had no idea this was a thing. We actually had a mass murder by someone posing as a police officer. So my wallet could ask them, and they say, "I need to see your driver's license, and I want to see the law enforcement profile, the full thing." So my wallet, which might actually be hopefully managed by someone smarter than me, because I don't want to fiddle with this, will say, "Oh, yeah, there's a law enforcement profile being asked by a law enforcement credentialed person. We suggest you share it." Cool. Then I walk into another bar and it says, "This bar just asked for your law enforcement profile of your driver's license. This is weird. Stop. This is weird. Do you want to answer yes or no? And if you say no, do you want us to report them to the authorities?" That's where you start to get governance frameworks in and someone taking care of relatively routine things. That's not a hard ecosystem to create. Kind of wonder why you're doing it for money. But that starts to show the levels of things that can be done by these wallets and by these agents. And somebody needs to help us with those. Sorry to jump in.
It's like we've been doing it in enterprise for ages, risk-based authentication using policy management.
Yeah.
And it's just flipping it round to put the authentication on the other side of the fence. So someone's asking for access to your data. So all the clever trickery and smart stuff that goes on in enterprise IAM can be put to play by the power of these mighty agents.
And we have a question that actually goes a little bit more into the mechanics. So how are we actually going to help those agents, have that power? And it's a question from Bob Celeste, who he points at you, Daryl. Says, is there any work you can point me to around access policy, communication, and interpretation by that agent? So I'll give it to Daryl first, and then whoever else wants to add to that.
I think the best work that's being done on that right now is still in its early stages. When you look at all of those levels, those layers that Drummond referred to at the Trust over IP Foundation. And that's actually where I would send someone to the discussions that are happening in both the governance working group and the ecosystem working group, where we start to understand what questions are being asked and what do we need to do in order to do, real access control, and how do we permission things. Every business is going to have different answers, but to Nicky's point, these are patterns we've seen before. There are ways to get through this. We don't have to reinvent everything. It actually makes it a lot easier when I don't have to integrate it into your system and I can carry trusted, verified information to you. You can do your work. Well, that's quite the 3D effect with my camera. It makes it a lot easier to do it this way when I have that in a digital wallet.
I am actually putting into the chat right now a link to one of my favorite Hyperledger Aries RFCs. That's the term they use for specs that they put out that they're implementing. And this one's to machine readable governance frameworks. So you saw an earlier demonstration, the Trust RP stack and the governance frameworks. Most people are looking at it, and in most cases, the governance is human readable, right? They're documents that cover all the policies involved with governing your layer of infrastructure. However, there are definitely any portion of those policies that can be machine readable become now agent processable, right? And they're already implementing. Sam Curran is leading a project there for a very simple machine readable governance framework for email address verification. It's already an automated process that you encounter with bots and sites you're registering with every day, right? Hey, I registered, bing, show me you control that email address so it's not spam, you're not spoofing it. That same process can be automated to produce a verifiable credential of your email address, so you don't actually have to go through the process. And if you have a number of them, you actually can very strongly show you control an email address. So that's a simple example of the kinds of machine readable policies that agents can, first of all, they can be digitally signed, so you are interacting with the policy from a particular governance authority, be it a university or a government or a company or whatever. And then your agent can read it and help you make trust decisions. I'm personally very bullish on that, and I know a lot of us on this panel are. Okay, we have just 3 more minutes by my watch if we're not going to go more than 15 minutes over the hour. So I'm going to try and pick one more question to close on. And I'm going to see, oh boy, there are just a ton of excellent questions here. It comes up quite a bit, but we haven't talked about multi-device wallets, as in usability of wallets across multiple devices. And Daryl, I know that's something you've covered in the State of the Wallet report, but what are our thoughts? Let's close on that question.
One of the, in the member pass realm, sorry for jumping in, we had some interesting learning that, the concept of me having an iPhone and just backing it up, restoring it to another iPhone is a really neat thing to do. It's a really good backup recovery. Until I naively learned, I had not heard of this, but one of the main vectors of fraud in the banking credit community is family fraud, where somebody knows your password. They could clone, if you imagine, if I can just clone your digital wallet and you have no idea, I just intercept all these commands like, yes, Drummond wants to send Daryl $50,000. Of course he does. What happens when I do that? So there's thinking already about how do you do the multi-agencies, how do you do multi-devices, but then also I think we need to ask the question, how do I make sure that's not happening when it shouldn't?
Yeah, exactly. That's critically important. And I know Marta's close to one of the things that the Aries community has been working with at Hyperledger is the very difficult questions of how you synchronize wallets. To the extent you can even use that term synchronize when you've got private keys in each wallet. But how we're going to make them usable across multiple devices, because we're not, yes, our phones are going to be very useful, but sometimes we don't have it, or we're going to be using other devices. So anything else anyone wants to say on that challenging question of multi-device wallets?
Could you,
well, I think that, oh, sorry, go on. Okay, so I think that the multi-wallet thing is a big issue, and basically we need one password or LastPass, if you will, for wallets and digital identities. Something that is very easy to use. Every device can have it, and ideally we can also move it to a wearable. I think that this will be a game changer if we can have a wearable wallet.
Wearable. That's a great point. Nicky.
Solutions treating wallets and devices as things and creating your little personal area network so that you use DIDCOM to communicate between the devices to verify each other that it's the right person. And I think we can learn some stuff from like smart homes or smart cars that could be applied to clusters, because we're all going to have loads of devices and shared devices with others. So
exactly. All right, well, I want to thank you all very much for being panelists here today. I knew it's going to be a fascinating discussion. It's even more fascinating. I knew we weren't going to get through all the questions, and we didn't even come close. We made a pretty good dent in them, but it's clear we're going to need to do another webinar to go deeper into the subject soon. And so please stay tuned for that. In the meanwhile, if you have any more questions that we haven't answered, please put them in. We'll stay on here for a minute to make sure you have a chance to get them in there, and then we'll line up the next webinar to tackle those questions. We'll be talking about the subject of the future of digital wallets for a while. And again, I want to thank Daryl and Nicky and Marta for bringing your expertise to this and sharing it with the community. And I look forward to the next round.
thanks, Drummond.
Yep. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.